What is going on, all you awesome super aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast. I'm Nick with my co-host
James.
Ruben is hopefully going to be joining us today. Eric couldn't make it, but we decided that the show must go on anyways. And before we get started, if you guys like our content, make sure you hit like, make sure you guys are subscribing, and make sure you share our podcast with other friends of yours who are into superheroes. And on Instagram at Heroes and Mutants podcast, we are actually doing a raffle. We're going to extend, it's supposed to end this week, but we're going to extend it by another week till next Thursday. You have to join, where we're going to be giving away a painting, raffling off a painting of the Batman Rogues Gallery in a poker game. Looks pretty awesome. We'll make an excellent addition on your wall or your man cave or your lady cave or whatever you want, wherever you want to hang superhero stuff. So make sure you guys are following, and we're going to be doing more stuff like that in the future. So with all that being said, let's get started with today. So we had been kind of behind on some of the updates and some of the news that got published and first look at things. So a couple weeks ago, the first teaser trailer for season 3 of Titans was released, and it looks pretty awesome. Obviously hinting at Jason Todd's death at the hands of the Joker and playing on the whole death in the family story arc, and also his resurrection as the Red Hood with the Under the Hood story arc. So first look, it's only a 56-second trailer teaser, and not much is really seen. Well, what do you think just first looks at it, Jimmy?
It looks interesting. I could see that they're really trying to tease at the death in the family storyline, which
Definitely
is interesting to see explored in live action because we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
It was a pretty brief teaser too. I was expecting a little bit more out of it, but it definitely looks interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was kind of expecting something a little bit more than that, but from what we saw so far, it looks pretty good. You see a little bit of a hint at Scarecrow with the vial, and then the eyes kind of going yellow, indicating the fear toxin. You see, I really like that wide shot of you see the Joker hammering away on Jason with the crowbar. Mm-hmm. Obviously, anybody who knows anything about comics and anything about the Joker, hit him with the crowbar. Obviously, that's like Jason Todd's kryptonite. So that's pretty cool that they had that. And I think in the beginning shot of him going to the amusement park, I'm assuming that's Amusement Mile. Is that fair to say? Just because that's the only thing that we have to pull from the lore, or unless it's just a generic amusement park.
But I think that's exactly what they're alluding to. I don't think that's just a generic reference there.
And there was like that shot of him stepping out of the shadows. It looks like he's confronting the mob bosses, like what he does in Under the Hood, and then like when I think they stand up at a certain scene, it kind of looks like it's reminiscent of that scene where he meets with the mob boss and lets them know that he's taking over the crime syndicate and that they all report to him. So it kind of looks like that's what that's going to be, at least. And it was cool to kind of see that little teaser shot of him as a Red Hood. We don't exactly know so much about what's happening. The only question I really have and what I'm hoping for is that there's a little bit of a time jump, because I think that's the thing that kind of feels a little bit off for me. Like, it's cool we're getting the Red Hood, and that's what they had said from the very beginning, was that season 3 is going to be the arrival of the Red Hood. But obviously Jason hadn't been killed yet, so this would have to have him be killed, come back as a Red Hood. So I'm thinking there has to be a little bit of a time jump to where it makes sense, and not just like Jason dies and then 6 months later he gets resurrected as a Red Hood. I don't know if that will exactly work. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of a time jump to allow time to pass and allow him to train and
that doesn't
build up that anger.
That doesn't mean that's how it's going to play out, though, Nick. Beware.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, we don't exactly know, but I mean, I think that's just the only thing that kind of felt like it. I was just hoping like season 2, it kind of seemed like he was going to die, and we already knew that the Red Hood was coming at some point. Mm-hmm. But season 2, I was actually hoping that he was going to die at some point, and then it would have just made sense I just don't want it to feel rushed, and that's just the way where I feel like the pacing might falter a little bit on that sense. That's just more what I'm saying. Just from a pacing perspective, I think they might end up having to rush through things by the beats and by the stories, just because he's dead. He needs to become the Red Hood, and then it's going to focus on that.
Yeah, definitely.
But it looks interesting. Make sure you guys, I think it's going to drop in August, so make sure you guys check it out on HBO Max. It's going to be awesome. And then next up, one of the bigger news that happened within the past month was that Aaron Taylor Johnson has been cast as Kraven the Hunter. He's supposed to be in his own solo film, but that there's going to be opportunities, I'm assuming, for him to appear in future films. And obviously, him being a big part of the Sinister Six, and Sony has been wanting to do a Sinister Six movie for the longest time. I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to play this character in multiple films. But what do you think about this casting choice?
I think it's a great casting choice. I think it's a fantastic casting choice. That's
Definitely.
that's not what worries me about it. What worries me is Sony's approach to whatever this is going to be.
Yeah, definitely.
Seems like with the Amazing Spider-Man films, most of the second one, I kind of enjoy the first one. I don't think it's a great movie, but I enjoy it. But the second Amazing Spider-Man film, the quality of it and then the box office performance of it kind of put them in their place with regards to like how much they can get away with like milking that character without plugging him directly into the more popular MCU. They seem to have learned their lesson by by cooperating, and now they're working with Disney so that Spider-Man is a part of that. Apart from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, lately Sony just does not have a handle on what to do with the character anymore. And the idea of just Sony trying to like still rebel, which I'm not trying to get into intra-studio fights and everything. I don't really care about all that, but it's just the fact that Sony wants to try to go out and strike out with their own Kraven the Hunter film without ever introducing him to Spider-Man just seems like a way to milk this franchise in a way I don't really find very appealing. Not that I'm against the Kraven the Hunter film per se, but it's very obvious that the studio's just doing it because they can instead of producing it the right way and putting him in the Tom Holland films. Like, that's what we want to see. We want to see Spider-Man take on Kraven the Hunter.
Yeah.
If they have a more approach like Warner Brothers has with Joker, which is a little bit different, I might be more open to it, but I'm a little hesitant on most of Sony's Spider-Man projects that are not and look, I don't like Disney as a company, but I'm skeptical. I really hate admitting this, but I'm skeptical of the ones that Disney is not involved in.
Definitely.
And the House of Mouse has a better grasp on that character. So
that's the weird thing about it is that they're trying to have their own universe and build up their own thing that's not Spider-Man, and all of these characters that inhabit Spider-Man's world and who we want to see Spider-Man interact with, especially someone like Kraven the Hunter, because I don't know. I won't really want to see a Kraven the Hunter movie without Spider-Man. I don't really want to see him where he is before and whatever his life was like before and hunting in Africa and then him having his enhancements. Like, I just want to see him fighting Spider-Man. Like, this is an interesting character, don't get me wrong. And he's really cool and one of the better known Spider-Man villains, especially because of the whole Kraven's Last Hunt story arc. But aside from that, I don't really want to see him without Spider-Man. I want to see him interact. It's just weird because it seems like
Venom. I do not like that movie. I don't think it's very good. I think it's actually really kind of bad, and I'm very skeptical of it. I'm like, so is Kraven the Hunter just going to be like another Venom? Just an opportunity for Sony to keep wanking themselves with this franchise. And
this is baffling because it just seems... Well, like the fans are saying, well, are we going to see, especially to have Tom Hardy and Tom Holland facing off each other? It just seems like everyone is like, hey, this is going to happen, right? It just seems like they're just like, well, maybe if it does, it's cool. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. Like,
okay, come on. And what makes it worse is, let's be honest, they know that these movies are going to make a lot more money if you plug Venom and Kraven the Hunter into the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. Tom Holland is the current incarnation of Spider-Man. He's a damn good one, in my opinion. I really like him a lot as the character. And not only that, it's making the Tom Holland universe suffer, because as much as I like Tom Holland, I feel like all of his villains have become Tony Stark rejects or leftovers.
Moving on from that, we had our first look at the Shazam family. And it was an interesting thing, too, because there was one thing I noticed was that the actress that plays young Mary is Grace Fulton is also playing the adult version. Mm-hmm. And in the first Shazam film, it was Michelle Borth, and it's actually her playing her. She's actually, the original actress is actually playing her adult incarnation. So I thought that was like the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh, is that Grace Fulton?
It looked pretty good. It looked pretty good. I'm getting a little bit more and more excited for the new Shazam film.
Definitely. Well, I knew that there was going to be an easy selling point for you because you're a big fan of Greek mythology. So I
Mhm.
don't really think that was too hard to sell you on,
Yeah.
especially because they're Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu's characters are going to be the daughters of Atlas, Hespera and Calypso. So
Mhm.
that's gonna
I
be
mean,
really cool. I think their
they're
costumes.
a lot of the stuff that they're exploring is not even stuff from the comic books, which already explores Greek mythology. So it feels like they're trying to go even further down the rabbit hole of Greek mythology than even DC Comics does, which is
Exactly.
actually kind of saying something because that's very
Interesting,
essential.
right?
Yeah, because how
But I
much.
think it looks cool. There's costumes look updated in the same realm that Zachary Levi's Shazam suit looks updated. They all look cool. I'm really excited to see what they do with this film, and more so exploring that connection to Greek mythology and what exactly is going to be their role if they're only going to have one scene like how they did in the original Shazam, and how the Shazam family is going to come into play with all of that. So interesting stuff, and I'm really excited to see it. We have Jamila Jamil joining the cast of She-Hulk series as a villain, Titania. And last but not least, we have Anthony Mackie, who said that he sees himself playing Captain America for 6 to 8 years. Is that something that is very realistic, or what is that something like that's just too far down the line, and we should take it like film by film or series by series?
Disney plans all of their phases well in advance. So I'm pretty sure if he's saying that, he actually means it. And I mean, I know Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans have kind of retired their roles, but I think they got in how many years?
But
Maybe
10 years,
about
like
10
10
years.
years.
I don't see why Anthony Mackie can't do this for another.
Exactly, especially just of everything that this character means now
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age, and especially where it left off at the end of now Captain America and the Winter Soldier, well, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but knowing of just his relevance and its importance in today's society and how that reflects things. I definitely think like that's also a big reason why he's saying I can see myself playing this role 6 to 8 years. I think the interesting thing though too is that Kevin Feige announced recently, I don't know if you heard about this, but that they're moving away from doing long-term contracts. So I feel like that's also like he had said this right before. This was literally like maybe a month or two before, and then Kevin Feige just announced this, like I think within the last week or two. So I think the thing with me is that does that mean they're just going to do it on a film by film basis? Like, okay, we're going to give you a contract for this movie, but that also can mean that doesn't mean like for two or
I
three
mean,
movies
I mean,
we're not going to give you another contract, or is that they're just going to have to keep signing new contracts?
it makes sense that they're changing the approach because the MCU has been around since 2008, and it's a universe that is going. It's expanded. There's over 20 movies. There's different television shows. It's a large universe, and they've been planning it all ahead. At some point, they're gonna have to end it and restart it. And I think that they're trying to like explore new approaches because they planned everything ahead so far. But then again, you see how planning things ahead doesn't always work. And the biggest unfortunate example is obviously Chadwick Boseman. Nobody is, yeah, rest in peace,
Rest
but
in peace, our king.
rest in peace. But like,
Yibambe.
there's no guarantee that, I hate saying this, sounds bleak, that these actors are going to be alive forever or something's not going to happen. So I guess, especially with Chadwick Boseman passing and them having to completely rework the game plan for Black Panther movies,
Exactly.
the fact that they're not able to rely on Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans anymore, and the fact that their relationship with Sony and Spider-Man seems to be rocky, and the fact that Sony keeps doing things that are not really helping Spider-Man standing in the MCU, I understand why they're starting to get to a point where they have to take a more like a film by film approach. It's not as guaranteed as it used to be. And I figured they probably established a large enough universe and storylines that they can get away with winging it a little bit more from here on out, but we'll see.
Exactly. I think that was kind of pretty much the reason that they gave in the logic. Well, we didn't want to have to lock in an actor for 5, 6 years down the line. So that way this frees them to pursue other interests and other films
And
or other work
as
without
much
being tied to this. And, oh, well, I can't do this show, or I can't do something else that I want to do because I'm tied in for we start filming for this next show or this next movie in 6 months or something like
And
that.
the fact of the reality is, I know that everybody loves these people in these roles, but actors want to act in as many roles as possible, and most actors that I've ever come across or known want to diversify their filmography as much as possible. It's hard to get stuck do that when you're stuck 10 years doing the same thing. It means
Exactly.
you have to say no to a lot of projects that you might like or roles that you might like because of contractual obligations. So I think even if actors who love it do not want to do this forever and want to be able to at some point be free of it.
With all that being said, too, make sure you guys check out Loki this week. It is the season finale, and it just keeps building and getting better and better and better by each episode. And we're going to have a lot to talk about next episode where we fully break down the entire first
Loki,
season, and it is freaking awesome. So,
and Black Widow next week.
and Black Widow also.
Loki.
So make sure you guys stay tuned for those. So what we wanted today's episode to focus on was, I'm sure you guys have all know, if you guys watch movies, then this is probably somebody who influenced this genre in some way or influenced cinema in general and movies and filmmaking in general. But this was somebody who was probably one of the most inspirational, influential directors of all time.
One of the
most more in the tragic passing of Richard Donner, who passed away. He just turned 90, I think, right? 91?
91 years old.
Just turned 91, and he was actually set to direct the final Lethal Weapon movie. I think Lethal Finale was. So just to give a little background, where he comes into superhero culture is he directed the first Superman movie in 1978 with Christopher Reeve, but he also directed movies like The Goonies. He directed The Omen. And I think The Goonies is what I knew him from the most. But he also directed Lethal Weapon. So this guy is somebody who's had a huge hand in making high-quality films and films that are very influential and inspirational to current directors and current cinema. So
classics in different genres too, across a good span of years.
Definitely. And see, when growing up, I didn't really know. Like when I first thought of Richard Donner, the only thing I thought about was The Goonies, because that was a childhood movie. If you were a millennial, you watched The Goonies as a kid just because your parents were a little bit old. Like your parents watched that movie, so that was something. Say, oh, you guys were gonna watch The Goonies because this is a good movie, and that was something. So I didn't even know until I think I was a teenager that he directed Superman. And knowing that I wasn't a big Superman fan, obviously I wasn't gonna pay any attention to it or pay any mind. So it's interesting looking back on that perspective, because here I was just like, wow, like now rewatching this movie for this episode, I had said to myself, wow, I was missing out on something that was revolutionary, because this was 1978. The only thing as far as pop culture superhero stories was Batman with Adam West in the 60s, which was very campy and very fitting for its time.
But they also had a Superman TV show, I believe, in the 40s or 50s, but that's not like, it was very low budget, very low, not very high polished. This was like the first time that people got to see Superman in all of his Superman glory. For all intents and purposes, this film, Superman the movie, invented the superhero genre in film and cinema. Not obviously in comic books, but within the realm of films, it virtually invented an entire industry and completely changed everything. It revolutionized everything. And watching it again, how old? 88, 98, 2000, 2018. Over 40 years later, watching this movie again, I can see that none of its influence has diminished. And I haven't really watched it since I was a kid. That was the last time I saw it. My grandpa had showed it to me when I was a kid. I hadn't really revisited in years except for certain scenes and parts. I could see how much of an impact that it has on modern superhero culture. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is another one, which we talked about over its anniversary not too long ago. Watching this again, I see heavy parallels and influence on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man with Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent and the relationship between them. A lot of origin stories, some of the spirit that they're going for, the type of feel. I mean, Spider-Man even makes a reference to Superman when Aunt May says, well, you're not Superman.
Definitely. Obviously, and then Mary Jane, the whole thing with like married their
Mary
relationship
Jane, Peter
with with
Parker.
the girl that they like, with their civilian identity and their alter ego. There's definitely parallels there too, and I didn't really make that connection until you said, and I thought, oh wow, yeah, there's definitely inspiration and influence. You can see Sam Raimi, especially being that Sam Raimi was a comic book fan, and so was Richard Donner. You can definitely see that they were definitely inspired by that aspect of it too.
Also, in regards to like, this was actually in its time a really classy production when you think about all the talent that was involved. It was written by Mario Puzo, one of the writers. Mario Puzo, the creator of The Godfather and Oscar-winning screenwriter of the Godfather films. David Newman, Leslie Newman, and Robert Benton, as well as having a creative consultant credit to Ben Mankiewicz, who actually wrote Citizen Kane, so he did a rewrite of this film.
Mm-hmm.
Marlon Brando in the cast, who obviously is legendary.
Yeah, I paid $3 million for 5 minutes of screen time in '78.
I mean, that's the kind of power that Marlon Brando has.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
So
Obviously, Gene Hackman, obviously, too, another great, high quality, high caliber actor of his time.
But there's something about it that feels very classy. Like it felt like they knew that this was the first of something, and they wanted to make it something really special. And the casting is a big influence. If you think about Batman '89, 11 years later, getting Jack Nicholson as the Joker is probably the closest parallel. Like, well, Superman had Marlon Brando in it, so we have to get some kind of legendary actor involved. And then, and also on other Batman films, like Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy, especially Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan always said that the scope of what he was going for was most indebted to Richard Donner's Superman. And as different as the Dark Knight films are from Superman, they're vastly different films. I could definitely see the influence. It has the same level with high level actors, the type of classiness that Christopher Nolan was going for, the big epic mythic origin story, especially within Batman Begins. It's a huge influence on that. It's such a template of superhero films that it's almost impossible at this point to make a superhero film that doesn't owe some kind of debt to Richard Donner's Superman. And I think that's impressive after all these years later, that obviously effects have advanced a lot more and we've seen more realistic looking flying effects for Superman since then. But all of them seem to still be using the original Superman as a template. And everyone who works in the genre always seems to nod to that film as kind of like a gold standard film.
Right, exactly. And I think it's interesting when you realize some of the background information that Donner actually didn't have any interest directing this film. He was only half interested at the time. He had gotten a call from producer Alexander Salkind, and he never met him. So he had told him that he had the rights to Superman and was making origin story and sequel back to back. And obviously because Donner was hot off the success of his breakthrough, The Omen, and he was gearing up to make The Omen 2. So Salkind had told him that he had secured Marlon Brando as Jor-El and Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, and he had a script by Mario Puzo, who from The Godfather, who wrote The Godfather, and that he was going to pay Donner. It was only until he told Donner that he was going to pay him $1 million. $1 million is when Donner, his interest increased, and then from there he's like, okay, well, someone else can direct The Omen, but I'm going to go ahead with this, and which I think was a blessing in disguise, which made this film work so well, because growing up in New York in the Bronx in the 30s, he was actually a big fan of Superman. Superman was his hero and was someone that he looked to as that classic symbol and that classic hero that we can all aspire to be. Because obviously Superman was created in 1938. So he was 8 years old when this character was created. So he had seen him from the very inception and from his very creation when Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel created him. So when he had first read the script, it wasn't up to par. He actually said that from the script, that the way these people were making it was a defamation. Superman was such a milestone in my childhood. He obviously loved comics and that he understood this character to his core, and he understood who he was and how he should be portrayed on screen. So he went on to say, I was brought up in the war years. I remember my folks being so depressed about the war and what was going on. The world needed heroes, and Superman was a great hero. He really struck with me and became a piece of hope. So Makowicz, his friend of his that he called to help him rewrite the script, they didn't get any credit for this actually, which is interesting. So he says, so Makowicz and I, we really felt like we were defending him. This was Apple Pie and American Dreams and everything that was American. These people, the producers, Salkin, his son Ilya, and Pierre Spengler, weren't brought up with this incredible character that meant so much to our lives. We couldn't allow this to happen to him.
I mean, you could tell, like, very few comic. I mean, in fact, I can't even really think of any like that actually really work this hard to remind you of its comic book origins by opening up almost like an old style newsreel and actually looking at a copy of Action Comic Books, which is where Superman made his debut, and taking it back to 1938 and telling it and setting it up like you see the comic book and it opens and it tells a story of the Depression in Metropolis, that this is going out of its way to acknowledge the debt to the original Superman, the original inception of it being released in 1938. I don't think I've ever seen any comic book movie that opens up like showing you, we're going to take you into the comic book and this is what the movie is. And I think it also works really well because having watched this again all these years later, and I was telling you this before the podcast, there's a lot of great superhero movies, and there's a couple that I actually like better than Superman.
Oh, yeah, same here.
Yeah, but there's not a single superhero movie in the history of superhero films that is so completely and totally nailed everything about its character in one film. As much as I love The Dark Knight and it's a great Batman film, there are it doesn't nail everything that I love about the character. There are certain elements missing that Christopher Nolan chooses to emphasize or de-emphasize. Same thing with Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, which I love, but it is not like a definitive full-on represent. None of them are. You can't say that about any of the Spider-Man movies, which get pretty close, but I still don't
definitely
think it's there. Or even the X-Men movies that get close. None of them. I don't think there's a single superhero film that nails every aspect of its character and the mythology and the essence of it and what it represents.
Yeah.
As a Superman movie, watching it again, even with all the advanced effects and everything that we could do now that you couldn't do in 1978, they're still going to have a hard time topping it as a Superman film because it is the ultimate Superman story. It has everything about the character is rolled into this film. It has Superman doing all the cool Superman things that you would want to see in the comic, whether it's turning back time, saving the San Andreas Fault, rescuing Lois Lane from helicopters. There's even that shot when he's pushing Lex Luthor's missile out and you see him. That really reminded me a little bit of that panel of All-Star Superman. I don't know if you remember, there's like the panel where it looks like he's pushing against it. Looks like it even influenced some of the comics.
Definitely. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, actually.
The behavior of Clark Kent as this bumbling fool, Christopher Reeve's performance, which goes out of its way to sell both Clark Kent and Superman as very distinct personas from each other.
Yeah.
Even when you're watching it and their interactions, the only thing that I could say, and I was watching it with a friend who had never seen it before. I showed this movie to my best friend, his first time seeing it, and he kept saying, "It's like, that's classic Superman. Like all the hijinks, the things that happen with him and Lois Lane, the story is like, this is the ultimate Superman movie. It nails everything about that character in one film." And what amazes me is that all these years later, there hasn't been a single superhero film that is so fully and thoroughly nailed its mythology as much as this. And I think that's an impressive achievement. All these years later and all these films that inspired him, there still isn't one. So watching it again, it's going to be really difficult to make a definitive Superman film to replace the Christopher Reeves Superman film, because it seems like they did it all in one movie. And that's what's the most impressive thing about it from a comic book point of view. As a movie,
Definitely.
It's actually really good. It's really well shot. It was shot by Jeffrey Unsworth. The cinematographer actually passed away before the film was released. So they even he shot 2001: A Space Odyssey, more classic science fiction. The movie's beautifully shot. It's elegant. It's separated into three different acts, and very interesting. The first act is like science fiction, and each one is about a hero's journey from one point or the other. The first part is like one of the first two sections are obviously the shortest one. You have from Krypton to the Earth. It's kind of a hero's journey, and you see all the stuff on Krypton, and right there, it's like a science fiction movie. Then the second section of the movie is like the 1950s, and it's meant to like kind of evoke films from the 1950s and the
Mm,
nostalgia and the glowiness of it all. And that's about his journey from Smallville to the Fortress of Solitude. And finally, the last yeah, and then you got Fortress of Solitude to Metropolis, and then Metropolis to the world. So it's like a series of progression of Superman getting from one point to the next through each section
definitely.
of the movie.
It feels like a comic from that perspective when you have different acts like that. But also, even you mentioned something too where you felt like said the beginning felt like the opening of a comic book. And even the way it ends too is pretty much like a comic, to where he drops off Lex at prison, and then the guards tells him, "Hey, Superman, you saved this country, and or this country is safe again thanks to you." Like, no, we're all in this together. Good night. And he just flies off into space and goes past the camera. It's just like, this feels like it would be something like at that time, or like in the 30s, it would have been a panel of comic. Like, that's how exactly you would have ended it. Then obviously you have John Williams' amazing score.
Oh, dude,
Obviously,
that's another thing I forgot about how good the score for this movie was. And this is a year after he did Star Wars.
yeah.
I'm gonna piss some fanboys off. I actually think this is a better score than Star Wars. I think it's a little. I could see you're even taking a breath and
No,
thinking.
I was the only thing I was gonna say. I don't know if that, it's funny we brought that up, and that's something I noticed. There seems like there's some similarities between this and some of the scores in Star Wars. I think it's Across the Stars. I know at the end, after the dun, 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 like when it goes, the melody goes up like doo, 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 doo. Like it sounds a little similar to Across the Stars. I don't know if it was just me. That was
No,
something
no,
that I
it is.
noticed.
But I mean, I would say it's also because as artists, you advance from film to film.
Oh
And
yeah,
what
definitely.
Star Wars he made before Superman, so it only stands to reason that when he scored Superman, he was a much
Mm,
more seasoned composer just
definitely,
based on Superman. I think the score is stirring.
definitely,
It feels epic, and the score is part of what makes it feel large from the beginning. When those credits
definitely,
roll and like the music swells, you feel like you're in for some kind of journey. And yeah, spectacular score, a great theme. I think my two favorite themes in superhero movies to this day are still John Williams' Superman theme and
and then Danny Elfman's Batman.
Batman theme. Yeah, I still
Yeah, those are just iconic. I don't think you're ever going to get past those. And
yeah.
especially nowadays, I think the only thing that would rival it would be Wonder Woman score by Hans Zimmer. I think that's like the only, as far as
But
modern comic book
that's
superhero
the
theme.
only one. But even then, I still don't think it has that kind of impact that the like. If you really think about a theme that defines its character, the theme for Superman and the theme for the original Batman, their each two first movies have a theme that sounds absolutely perfect for the character that it's supposed to represent. You can't hear that no 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 to this day.
Yeah,
Even people who have not seen the Christopher Reeve Superman hear that and they instantly know it's the Superman theme. It's the Superman march. So even if you've never seen these movies, you know that music represents Superman. And I think that speaks to kind of the iconic power that it has. I mean, the cinematography behind this is beautiful too. This is a
definitely,
beautiful, elegant looking, really well made film. The script
definitely,
is really thought out, and I don't know if we talked about this, but a lot of the Superman mythology is inspired by Christianity and the Bible, and a lot of stories in the Bible, and they work really hard to try to sell the themes of the Bible in here, like kind of the Moses story of somebody being sent down to earth, sent down, the last son of a dying place. He's going to be a hero for these great people, a great hero for these people. It also has elements of Christ in there, where
definitely,
yeah, Marlon Brando is kind of sending his son to be the savior of mankind to kind of help them. So there's a lot of Christian symbolism, a lot of biblical imagery that goes into this, and like that deep type of mythological feeling that Superman has.
definitely.
And I think another thing that what makes this work is Christopher Reeves sells the hell out of both characters, out of both Clark Kent and
Definitely.
Superman. He creates very distinct personalities for each of them, and they both feel very true to the essence, the source material. Even his voice as Superman, when he's saying "I never lie" or anything like that, that Midwestern male voice that he has is almost like the perfect voice you would imagine Superman to have.
It's funny too because there's a brief moment when he has the interview with Lois
Oh, that's
where he immediately like he knocks on her door like, "Hey, we're going out for dinner, right?" He has that brief moment. He takes off his glasses and he's about to like you hear it in his voice too. His voice changes and he says, "Lois, I have something to tell you." And then he just reverts back. Oh, we're gonna go. Like, we should go now. And like,
And I love when
just,
Barry White asks, he's like, "Ken, could you open this for me?" And he tries, "Oh, sure," just like a simple bottle. He bumbles it like, so I'm like, my God, this guy is really working hard to like really sell that. But another thing I wanted to get to is Amy Adams is a good actress, and I hate to bring her into this, but I think she's a fantastic actress.
oh yeah, without a doubt.
I not really convinced that she really fits Lois Lane the way that Margot Kidder does, that spunky spirit, the attitude, which Amy Adams does have, but it's not the same thing. That Margot Kidder feels a little bit more like the Lois Lane of the comic books, her attitude, her style, and the interactions between them. That interview scene that you're talking about is really good, and I honestly, a lot of what happens in that conversation is something they would never allow into a superhero film these days.
Oh yeah, with the whole well, what colors?
Yeah, there's a lot of playful chemistry between them. There's a
Yeah.
lot of sexual innuendo, and there's even a part where she asks him like, "How big are you? I mean, how tall are you?" And you kind of know what they're the things
Yeah.
that the things
I
that
think yeah, I think that's the thing about it is Lois and Superman are seen as that classic quintessential
but
power couple in all of superhero comics and all of superhero media. And it's funny too, even people who don't know anything about these characters, there's so many references to, oh, are you going to be my Lois Lane? Oh, the
yeah,
man will say, "Can you be my Lois Lane?" The girl will say, "Oh, can you be my Superman?"
yeah.
So it's just funny from that aspect, and I think they hammer home why that relationship has been such a mainstay and why it has branched into so many and infiltrated so many different aspects of pop culture,
And
because you see the way their interactions, it not only that, but it feels just so genuine and so sincere and so realistic in that sense. And when you see
what
Amy Adams and Henry Cavill, don't get me wrong, they just don't have that same kind of chemistry. Great actors,
yeah, they're great
they
actors, but they don't have that chemistry going
yeah,
for them.
they just don't. But I also, script right,
It's
but
also
also
the
too, I
way
think it's
that the
just
movies are filmed. I think this is across the board. Is just commenting on sexuality in like blockbusters and big entertainment. There's been blockbuster films along for around a long time, but even in the 1950s and the 1970s, stuff that was aimed at a large audience, for even if we knew that kids were going to see it, there would be a lot of stuff in these films that was just for adults, a lot of innuendo and sexuality. And
yeah. Like I was surprised by that scene. I was like, oh
yeah,
wait, oh yeah, I'm in 1978 now.
yeah,
I
in
forgot this was.
1978. And I think that's kind of missing for some modern comic books, the idea that some of these people are actually attracted to each other, and there's a good whiff of sexuality that goes on in that interview, the way that they tease each other, the whole thing, asking questions about my panties, and she's like, "Well, do you like pink?" "I love pink." And like, like the things that they're going back and forth, I'm like, that's good. We need to see
Yeah.
more of that in superhero films. It's kind of like that playful sexual chemistry that I feel a lot of superhero stuff is afraid to tackle. And I'm like, read the comic books. Batman is a very sexual person, a very
Well,
sexual.
especially as Bruce Wayne, because
As
that
Bruce
fits
Wayne.
his demeanor
And
and the image that he's projecting.
I feel like a lot of modern comic book films trying to drain this aspect out, and I don't think it should. Again, I don't think obviously sex should not be the focus of a comic book film. That's ridiculous. But I don't think I think that the absence of sexuality or scenes like this, something, I don't know. I think it could improve certain superhero films. I really
Definitely.
appreciated the kind of genuine chemistry. It actually felt like real adults who kind of have a thing going on. It also has like the feel of a classic screwball comedy romance from the 1940s, which their relationship has always had.
Exactly. And I
Yeah,
think it's funny you brought up about the casting and the choice of Christopher Reeve. And especially because he was a newcomer, which is what Richard Donner wanted. They were looking at actors that were seen as those handsome A-listers who could draw in a huge audience. So obviously you had like Robert Redford they were looking at, Burt Reynolds, but Donner thought it was best to go with an unknown, especially just because there was so much weight that this person had to carry being the star, but also he has Gene Hackman next to him. Then he has obviously Marlon Brando in this cast. So it's like they had to bring that A game. And when he first saw Christopher Reeve, he actually didn't like him. He actually didn't think much of him and thought, okay, no, we're probably not going to go with you. But it wasn't until someone said, well, let's go see him on Broadway. You can see him in this play. And that's when he said, oh my God, this is our Superman. So they went back, had another test screening. I think he had brown hair at the time. They put shoe polish in his hair. He saw him in the suit, and then he had said, this is our Superman. This is our Clark Kent. But one of the main issues was that he was 6'4", but he was very, very skinny. I think he was like 180 pounds. And when you're 6'4", like I'm 170 and I'm only 5'8". So you can imagine Christopher Reeve only weighed 10 more pounds than me, but he was like 5-6 inches taller. So that was the thing. Like they had wanted to put rubber in his suit and make the muscle, and pad his suits that way he looked like he had more muscles. But Christopher Reeve actually refused to do it. And he had promised Donner, I promise you I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to look this part the best that I can. So that was obviously also something that was a big gamble for Richard Donner to go not only with an unknown, but a guy who was 6'4". He had to show to the producers,
but he did a
this
good
is our
job.
Superman at 180 pounds.
But he did a good job of bulking up.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, it's not Henry Cavill, but we've already discussed this. The body standards, especially within superhero films, are vastly different.
Especially at that time.
Especially at that time. But he looks built, and he's a believable size for Superman. Maybe
he doesn't have the bulk, but I think he looks lean when he's in the suit. He looks someone who's in pretty good shape. Yeah, he fills out the suit nicely, I think. And fun fact too, there's a Star Wars connection. Actually, David Prowse, who played Darth Vader, who was in the suit, he actually trained Henry Cavill. He trained Christopher Reeve for this role.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah, so pretty cool. That's how he was able to get in great shape. But I don't think this film doesn't work without him. And the fact that Donner had so much courage to go with an unknown, especially with all those circumstances going up, that they weren't in his favor at all. But knowing that I have trust in this actor, this is the guy I know who can best portray this character, and I don't think it works without him because his performance is so charismatic and he's so believable in both parts as Clark Kent and as Superman. And this is just the quintessential role when you think of what is the best portrayal of a superhero or the classic example. Christopher Reeve definitely has to be at the top of that list.
Yeah, and it also has moments that you would expect to see in a comic book. This scene is not really realistic at all. It completely defies so much physics and gravity, but it's a super, so I'm going to go into it anyway. It's a scene where Superman takes Lois Lane flying around and she's holding on to him and they're in space together and it looks almost like she's flying. Obviously, none of that's really realistic at all. That's not what would happen, and she probably would have been dead from
easily.
But there's a lightness to it. There's a certain type of sweetness to it, and there's this type of humanity that is reminiscent of Superman and Lois Lane's relationship in the comic books. The way that they're kind of gliding next to each other, the magical things, the things that are going off in her head, the way that they kind of have a non-verbal way of communicating each other where she kind of thinks things and he nods at him and they're together. It's really quite romantic, actually. It's very
that scene is just like you would never see this in a modern day superhero film by any means.
I feel like that's something that more superhero films could use, like put a little bit more wit, a little bit more like charm or a lightness or a magic or a sense of romance. Here's another thing,
some kind of sincerity at least, right?
Sincerity. Here's another thing, I don't think they did as good of a job, but I actually think Wonder Woman 84 tries to do a lot of what Christopher Reeve's Superman film is doing, especially with her relationship. What's his name?
Steve Trevor.
Yeah, with Steve Trevor. Like when they're flying together in that invisible plane. I get the idea
Especially
that
with the fireworks going off. They're
yeah,
trying to set this mood of romantic and it's
like
cute. It's
yeah.
cute. It's all that.
And like it has moments like you said where Superman, and this is as fucking Superman classic comic book as he literally comes and rescues a cat out of a tree for a little girl. And I'm like, you know what? I get that people might think that's corny, but that is Superman. That is that character. And of course, it's funny when the little girl comes and her mom smacks her after she says, "Oh, a man flew out of the sky and gave me my cat out of the tree," or something. I think the mom smacks her or something like that. But
I really like that they show a lot of humanity in this character too, and I think that's more apparent. Well, I mean, this is apparent throughout his time, but even more so when he's a teenager and he's just pondering, I could do so much more. I could dominate sports. I can be the best quarterback ever. And because obviously he obviously has to control his powers and not give too much away what he's truly capable of. And he's walking with Jonathan, and he just tells him there's more. He tells him you're destined for greater things than just football. I don't know how exactly he words it, but because he tells him like I could be a quarterback.
Yeah, you're meant more to do on this planet than
that you're meant more than just football. So obviously hinting that you're destined for greater things. Like you can become the greatest quarterback, or you could dominate and be so much better than everybody, but that wouldn't be fulfilling your potential to the best of your ability and helping humanity in the best way possible. So I really like those interactions. You see parents, and even though we saw really one scene with him interacting with Jonathan, you can really see how this character and how this man grew up to be a highly moral, empathetic, compassionate character.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of the relationships in this movie are great, but I feel like one person we're not highlighting, and it's hard to cover everything, but I'm just thinking Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. And here's the thing, I actually clocked it. He shows up at the 1 hour point. So it is like 60 minutes into the movie before you see the villain, just like it's 48 minutes in the movie before you ever see him in the suit. And this is how I could see Christopher Nolan taking a lot, especially with Batman Begins, in the sense of taking your time before he gets into the suit, taking the time before we introduce some of the bigger villains or the plot elements. I could see
set up the story.
Like you could definitely see a lot of it, and I like the patience. And I think that might be a harder sell for some audiences today, to have a villain that doesn't show up until the 1 hour mark sometimes, or have him spend that much time out of the suit and spend that much time in Smallville and that much time in Krypton. I kind of feel like comparatively, like in Man of Steel, that feels a lot. It rushes past it a little bit faster. I feel like we get to the Superman suit a little quicker.
Which is kind of funny because we have about 20 more minutes, 15 more minutes of him in Krypton.
Yeah.
That's funny. We kind of, and I don't, and that was one of the things I think as far as pacing, I said, I don't really think we needed to have this much time in Krypton. All we need to do is just set up the planet's exploding. Nobody's listening to Jor-El. Jor-El has a son, and he sends him off to Earth to have at least one, to save his son and have their people exist. And
banishing some people to the Phantom Zone, there's like General Zod is there. I think from what I've read, since it's a lot of the script when they were working on it, they were trying to really like parallel it with a lot of religious concepts. And just how Jor-El kind of sends his one and only son to be the savior of mankind. I read somewhere that that's supposed to be similar to God casting Lucifer out of heaven. So that's them trying to like.
I thought like maybe like the archangels or something, like casting them out.
Archangels who come back as villains for part 2. Obviously, they were set.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, so that was meant to be kind of a biblical parallel. The fact that he's banishing them to the Phantom is the same idea of Lucifer being thrown out of heaven as a fallen angel and being cast to hell, and kind of coming back to terrorize. So there's a lot of interesting.
So getting back to this, then what is it that works so well for you about Gene Hackman as Lex in this film?
Oh, I forgot. He feels like the comic book version of the character. There's a slight level of campiness to Lex Luthor in this movie that I like, but it's not overt. It's very subtle camp, where where a lot of like, how do I put it? Where he's kind of a funny character, his megalomania, but
Mhm.
it's put through in ways that are really subtle in his behavior. There's something a little bit funny about his level of arrogance, and
Mhm.
his complete confidence is in himself is so ripped
Like
out
the
of
only,
ripped
yeah, I definitely feel there's a lot of subtleness with him and the campiness. I think the more what I think about him being campy is every time he yells for his secretary, Miss Regina, he's like yells it
yeah,
out loud.
but he never goes full on
Yeah,
camp, just enough to make you smirk at some of the stuff. And there's like a casual cruelty, like when who's the one that's working with him? She says that her mom's in Hackensack in New Jersey, and
like his secretary, Miss
yeah, his secretary's in New
Metzrick
Jersey.
or something with an
Yeah,
M.
and he's basically gonna like kill New Jersey and like let her mom. And his reaction to her is like, whatever. So well, so what? Like when she's saying, "Hey, my mom lives there," he has this really casual cruelty and narcissism to him.
Hmm.
And
Oh, even like he says a similar thing to Otis, the other bumbling henchman, where he says, "Oh, that means more to me than your life, which I would gladly trade, by the way, for in an instant." Like,
and that is totally Lex Luthor. That sounds like something Lex Luthor would say. Here's another touch that I liked, which at first I didn't understand. It seemed like Lex Luthor had hair, but then after a while you realize like Lex Luthor's supposed to be bald, whatever.
well, that was also because
Yeah,
Gene
you
Hackman actually
realize that
didn't
he
want
has
to.
hair pieces at a certain point when he's swimming, and then they show the hair piece. I actually think that scene is a little vaguely comical because the whole time you think that that's his hair. And I think the fact that in this movie he's not, even though he's bald, you see him with hair most of the time. It's because of his narcissism,
Yeah,
because he's Lex Luthor. He can't. It's whole part of his whole
yeah.
personality where he thinks he's a superior person. So of course he's not going to walk around bald.
Yeah,
I,
well, I think Otis, I think when he was in the pool, I think he was like combing his hairpiece or he was looking
yeah,
for it.
that
That's
that
when I was like, wait a minute, he's wearing a hairpiece? Like,
okay, but that's the touch that I like, because at first I was like, he should have been bald, but whatever. This thing nails everything else so perfectly that I'm not going to complain about the hair. Then I realized the hair is a little bit is a little bit of a joke. It's a touch of camp, and it speaks volumes about Lex Luthor's narcissism and the way that he sees himself and how highly. Of course, he's not going to allow himself to go out into the world bald.
yeah,
That he's going to put on these wigs and everything. And I think that's what makes the ending kind of great. You kind of tell that he's embracing who he is as Lex Luthor.
yeah.
Snatches his wig off. He says, "I'm like the world's greatest criminal mastermind," and like you finally see full on Lex Luthor. But I like the touch of Lex Luthor being so
I
narcissistic that he
I
has.
will say I think the only thing that doesn't hold up for me, especially because I've gotten more into Lex Luthor, I understand this character, especially reading also Superman, which is probably one of the best examples of the relationship between Lex and Superman. I wish there could have been more of vendetta or more of a personal grudge that he had against Superman. His thing was mainly just money and real estate. He didn't really have any kind of vendetta or any kind of personal grudge or anything related towards Superman. It was just,
But I
oh,
think this is where it would develop, though, because
yeah,
it's
that's where.
this
But as
encounter.
far, but more so because of the fact, like Lex, his Superman's very, even though Superman never did anything to him, his very existence angers him and makes him very upset because in his mind, I can't be the greatest person on this planet. I can't
I
be
mean,
the smartest when
they
this person who is a god walking around doing anything and
they hint
yeah,
at it a they hint at it a little bit. I
they
also
hinted at it a little bit. I think that's just
the
more for
beginning
me,
of this.
just because that of that.
Yeah,
Like he doesn't have those like strong fits of jealousy against him. Like as far as this is a great movie, and I really like this portrayal of Lex. I think just for me, I more so I think of classic Lex or a Lex Luthor to me is that one who has just his very existence just angers him and pisses him off.
I also think that this is where it would start to like really piss him off
Yeah,
more, because now he's officially like foiled a plot of his. So of course, after this point, I think it sets it up for him to be his arch nemesis,
yeah,
where it starts that way. But I think one of the things that hints at it was that line of dialogue where one of his assistants is talking about Superman, this godlike, perfect human being, and then she's responds, he's like, "Well, he's not from this planet." And then she's like, "What makes you think he's not from this planet? Because if there was anybody perfect from this planet, it would have been me." Like you could tell
Yeah,
that
you definitely see those, but I think he's
yeah,
kind of just throwing those little shades. You can see those little
like,
bits of jealousy. I think just more with what I was saying was just that fact of his very existence. Just anytime anybody mentions him,
he
he
thinks
just
he's
gets
superior.
pissed off, and you could
I,
just see there was a little bit of those hints of
I
jealousy.
I think it's because at this point he still thinks he's superior to Superman because
Right.
Superman has yet to foil one of his plots. And I think another key line of dialogue is when he puts that thing of kryptonite on him, the necklace, and he says, as he said, brain over brawn, or feel
Yeah,
like
that's
he's
exactly what
like
he
trying
says.
to show him in his little smug way that your superpowers mean absolutely nothing to me.
Okay, I didn't really think about
Yeah,
that. I could have seen that this is an arc for this character to
yeah, that
have a huge vendetta and have a huge personal issue with this character going forward.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that works in itself. As far as I know, Donner, something I wanted to get into now was just I know there's been some talks about if this movie works, if it was made today, would it work so well? Or would it work in that same vein? Or would it have that same kind of impact as far as with the audiences? Will the audience accept it as much as they did? And it's funny too because that's been a kind of thing, and they Donner actually touched upon this where they asked him, "Is it possible that an on-screen Superman just has no place in today's jaded, less hopeful world?" And what he had said was, "Well, maybe it's an issue that the times have changed, so they want to make things a little different to stand out." What do I personally think about them referring to the other iterations of Superman that have been in film? I have to respect them for their approach. Is it my approach? No, boy, oh boy, it's hard to say like what they got right with Christopher Reeve. It really is. We try to keep a tradition alive. It was a different time and a different way of life when we made it. Now it's their time. Good luck, but I think I screwed them up by doing the first one because it was more in the tradition of the reality of the comic book that puts them in a bad spot. So, what do you think about that?
I mean, it's hard to know how a Superman like this would go down. I don't think I'm not as skeptical of it as some people are. People you can't make like a sincere Superman movie because I mean, look how popular Captain America became. That's a pretty square character. To be honest,
Very.
very square character, and he's all bright and all positive, and just like I don't know, like
He can do this all day.
yeah, it's almost like a perfect example of humanity, that
Mm.
pure heart of gold, like a really good person. So I'm like,
The
audiences really loved and
100-year-old virgin.
hmm?
The 100-year-old virgin.
Yeah, the 100-year-old virgin.
I think the only difference with that is where people become less they become less kind of interested is because Captain America is still human. He can run really fast. He can run 50 miles an hour. He can do all these incredible things, but he can turn an ankle and be out of the fight just like any other human. And I think with Superman, he's all powerful, all godly like, and can fly at the speed of light, shoot lasers out of his eyes, can lift an incredible amount of weight. I think it's just with that, like
Push the
people when
planet
they,
out of alignment.
yeah, oh, or fly so fast that he reverses time like he does in this movie. But I think it's more so that aspect that he doesn't really have any inherent flaws in his character. He's so powerful, he doesn't really have any flaws. I think that combined makes people less interested in the character like this, and they say he's boring.
Hmm.
As whereas in
I
Captain
mean,
America, he all intents and purposes, he's human. You can still shoot him and he'll get wounded. He can turn an
look,
ankle. He can break a leg.
I think that you could. I'm not as
Oh, I'm not saying you could. I think
yeah,
that's
I
far
think
more
that you could
so.
and it would be successful. But it's like with the Richard Donner thing. My thing with the new Superman movie, especially after watching it, if I were making a Superman film from a filmmaking standpoint or even from a script writing standpoint, I would have a really hard time finding an angle if I want like that doesn't copy what this film is doing. It
Oh yeah,
is like I really feel like Richard Donner and all the writers, what they basically did, they made the ultimate live action version of that story that really completely taps into it. I cannot envision a film that taps more into what a superhero is supposed to represent more than this movie. Like it's a tall order to make the definitive Superman movie. I think like what he did is like he made the definitive Superman film. what is anybody else going to do after that?
Like
I
it's
mean, you could
hard.
improve the
You can't
effect,
you
or
can't you can't
but
top this.
as a
And
Superman film, maybe obviously today's effects are going to be more impressive or whatever, but as a superhero film, as a Superman film capturing the Superman mythology, this would be really difficult to
yeah,
beat. He really seems like he went out of his way. I'm going to make Superman the ultimate Superman movie, the definitive Superman movie. And it just feels like anybody else, that anything that anybody else would try to do in live action would seem like an afterthought to this movie. Whereas as much as I love the Batman films and a lot of how they capture a lot of what's good about Batman and different angles, they still isn't a single Batman film that captures everything about what Batman is and what he represents the way that this Superman movie does for Superman. So I don't know how you would ever top this as a Superman film. I
yeah.
have a hard time seeing how like anybody writing the script would be daunted trying to be more true to the comics or make it feel the way it does. It was interesting. This came out in 1978 before a lot of my favorite Superman stories and comic books were published, and yet it still feels very true to it. I don't know if it's that true or if this movie even, or part of it has to do with the fact that this movie probably had an impact on the comic books.
But definitely did, especially when you take into effect of something like also Superman. You hear Grant Morris and say, yes, we definitely use the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman as an inspiration, and that's something we use to write our story and to help craft this character.
Yeah. Truth, justice, and the American way. There's even that quick nod that they don't do because it's the 70s and phone booths are not really like a thing like they were in the
Oh,
90s.
yeah, I thought that was funny where he looks at it and he's like
Yeah, like there's like a nod to it. Like, dude, it's the 1970s. We can't have him go into the phone booth and change. We know that's classic, but what they like, even though they know they can't, they're like, Richard Donner's like, we have to nod to it. We have to at least have him look at a phone booth, and you could tell that
exactly.
he's considering, and you could almost read his like the look on his face, like,
Yeah, he's like,
nah, that's not gonna
nah,
work.
nah, I can't do that.
That's not gonna work. But you see him considering, and so it's a little nod to it. But him running through the street and like pulling his shirt like, you know, and he's pulling his shirt apart, and you see
That classic superhero reveal or the superhero exchange.
you can't like that's what I'm saying. It's Superman doing all the Superman things that you expect Superman to do. It's all in this
Mm-hmm.
one movie. How did he
Exactly.
manage to capture every single classic thing about Superman in one movie and completely nail the portrayal of it? And like, I like Henry Cavill as an actor. I particularly like him in Justice League, Snyder's cut of Justice League, but they do not capture the essence of the Superman character the way that this movie does. Like this, I don't even know what else to say without repeating myself, but
Yeah.
it's the most full version of a comic book film I've ever seen.
Yeah. Oh, and just to get back to what you had said about the superhero taking the classic reveal, or that's more attributed to Superman than any other character. They actually had that nod in the first Spider-Man movie also at the Thanksgiving parade when he's running in slow motion and you just see, and I'm like,
There's
even
another,
as a kid, I was like, that supposed to be like Superman inspired? That feels like Superman.
yeah, it's more of a Superman inspired, but that just shows you its influence on the comic.
Like another Superman, another nod to that movie that Sam Raimi did.
And didn't you also say that Kevin Feige said that they use that as the template?
Yeah. So I was going to get to that actually. So just so that people are aware the impact and the influence this had on current superhero movies, Christopher Nolan and Patty Jenkins used this as their inspiration for when Christopher Nolan did Batman Begins, and then when Patty Jenkins did Wonder Woman. This was one of their templates, and one of the things they're doing. Well, we want to make our own thing, kind of like what. And Patty Jenkins actually said that Donner's film actually changed her life and was one of the main influences on Wonder Woman. And Feige actually said something very interesting. Marvel, the president for Marvel for the MCU, he had said that it is still the archetype of the perfect superhero film origin story, and we watch it before we make almost any one of our films. So that's quite a legacy to leave behind, and I don't think people are aware how much of an impact and how influential it was at its core, especially the grandstanding 40 years after. It's still seen as that quintessential superhero movie that kickstarted that boom.
it kickstarted it, and it makes sense that the first superhero would be the one who kickstarted the first superhero movie. And we've seen superhero films advance. I've seen a couple that I like more, but there's never been like they made the first superhero movie is the definitive Superman film, and anybody else that anybody ever tries to do with Superman is gonna look like an afterthought after
Very.
this movie. And even Stan Lee, this was one of his favorite movies. He was a really big fan of the Richard Donner Superman. He said that he thought it was such a wonderful film. He said the way that it brought audiences together and it showed people that these characters were more than just comic strips. They're more than just kids entertainment, that a wide audience could kind of appreciate the magic, and it's something that can connect people across generations. But Stan Lee was actually a really big fan of Richard Donner's Superman, and I could definitely see why.
Yeah. And even Jerry, the Superman co-creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster gave a positive reaction. Shuster actually said he was delighted to see Superman on the screen. I got chills. Chris Reeve was just the right touch of humor. He really is Superman. So when the co-creators give a pass and say, "Hey, that was good," then you know you're onto something gold.
Yeah.
Unless it's Bob Kane, and like he had said with '89, we don't talk about that.
Bob Kane.
Because that was more of a nod. He actually did like Batman '89, but more thing I was hinting at was, well, what would Bill Finger have said?
Yeah, what would Bill Finger have said? I know Bob Kane enjoyed '89 Batman, but Bob Kane also said Val Kilmer was his favorite Batman. So I mean,
Well, giving everything we know about Bob Kane now, I don't know if his opinion has much merit anymore. He probably was just trolling.
Yeah,
to be honest. But you're 100% right on that. This is going to be that one superhero film that is going to be hard to top, especially somebody as iconic, as grandstanding in the superhero community as Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And is the gold tier, is that gold standard of good superhero movies that you want to. This is when you say, oh, anytime somebody creates a superhero origin, they say, okay, I want to make this like what Richard Donner did with Superman. I want to make it on that level. So when you think of something like that, you just can't really, like I said, I think where Snyder went a little wrong and pissed a lot of people off was that he made his Superman a little bit more moody, a little bit more angrier. I think his thing is he was actually trying to show an arc.
It seems less heroic and
less heroic. I think his thing was he was trying to show an arc, and I think that's the thing too, is why it would be a little bit hard to translate this character to a modern day cinema with just his incredible powers and where he stands when he's already pretty much that incredibly moral, empathetic character who can do no wrong. When we see him in Metropolis, he's already the Superman that we know and love, and the Superman that we expect. And when we saw that, even though we saw that with Henry Cavill, people had said, well, this isn't what Superman would do. This isn't how he would act. And people got pissed off. So I think it's in a hard place for a character like Superman, because when you do it like you do with Richard Donner did with Superman, oh, well, it's the big boo Boy Scout. He's boring. He's uninteresting. There's nothing great. There's nothing you can do with him. There's nothing exciting about him. But then when you do something like at the other end of the spectrum with Henry Cavill, like Zack Snyder tried to do, oh, well, this isn't Superman.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're in a little bit of a rut with that character because of expectations of always differing and always saying, oh, he's boring, but that isn't how he would act.
Really quick, I just want to say one more thing. I know somebody who once told me that as far as the Superman movie goes, that he says this is such the perfect Superman film that it's safe to say that if you don't like Superman the movie, then you don't like Superman.
I think that's an interesting analysis. And
I mean, I don't know if
but
I see his point of view as like that makes sense, because that is the ultimate version. Like that is like it's almost safe to say that if you don't dig what this movie's doing with the character, then you're probably not that into the character anyway.
Well, especially finding out that Richard Donner was a big Superman fan and he pulled from the comics, and that was what they were trying to portray. You can't say, oh, this is a bad Superman movie. Well, Richard Donner was a big Superman fan. He actually had been around since this character was created. So I think he knows a lot about this character, more so than I think you give him credit for.
Yeah, and I actually remember when I took my grandfather to go see Man of Steel, and
You
I
didn't
remember,
like it?
yeah, he liked it quite a bit, and he said it was good. He's like, but he's like, I that still does. He's like, that still doesn't. He's like, that's a good movie, and I was impressed with it. He's like, it does not feel like Superman the way that Christopher Reeve does. And all these years, I was like, I have to say, I agree with you, Grandpa. You were right.
Yeah,
That it's not Superman the way that Christopher. Not just because, oh, that's your grandfather's Superman. No, that is Superman. It's not your grandfather's Superman. That's Superman. Period.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm jealous that you managed to get your grandpa to go to a movie. I don't even think I ever saw a movie with my grandpa. Well, at the
Really?
theaters.
My
At the
grandpa went
theaters.
to actually I to go see The Dark Knight with him. I remember that
Man,
too.
you're lucky.
Yeah.
You're lucky. That's awesome,
He
man.
told me that when he saw The Dark Knight, he said, you know, when I was a kid, I really thought that Superman would be like the most popular character over the years and get the most movies. Like I never thought that Batman would be the one that my grandkids would be really into. Like that's a whole other side story.
Yeah.
But he
Well,
always
I mean, up until the '80s, he was, and
yeah,
then
but because he said when I grew up, it was all about Superman. Yeah, we all knew Batman and everything. He says, like you kids, it's all about Batman. It's the other way around. But yeah.
well, with all that being said, rest in peace to Richard Donner, a definitely highly influential
All right, like
American director.
beyond that, we have to say a lot because this is this film. Rest in peace to Richard Donner, which is why we covered it. Rest in peace, Christopher Reeves.
And rest in peace to Margot Kidder also.
Rest in peace, Margot Kidder. Rest in peace to the screenwriters Mario Puzo, Ben Mankiewicz, and rest in peace to the cinematographer Jeffrey Unsworth, because most of the people who were involved in this film are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad because I know this is an old film, but it's not that old.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that was hard for me to watch it too. I kind of had those brief moments where I was just getting sad, like especially all those scenes with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, especially to have their little Aladdin moment flying in the sky. I just got really sad because I'm like, this is such a tender, sweet moment, but both these actors are gone now. Like,
and it's really sad because both of their stories are very tragic.
Oh, very.
Reeves and Margot Kidder, both of them had very sad ends, and the stories where their life went kind of after is not pretty and it's not happy.
Exactly.
But
rest in peace, for all who were involved in this movie, who have passed. Rest in peace. Thank you guys for giving us such a great quintessential Superman movie. It is just amazing.
Can I say one more thing that I think is kind of beautiful is like as sad as the Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder's end is, it's nice that we'll always have something captured on film.
Timeless.
When they're flying together in the sky, which is beautiful. It's sweet. It's romantic. And it's better we remember him that
exactly. Way. Yeah. So make sure you guys like and share this video, and make sure we're going to be starting this is going to be the first video we're going to have on this new channel, so make sure you guys are sharing, subscribing with, and letting people know about this podcast. This is going to be strictly a channel for us, so this is going to be a way for you guys to follow just our content and all of our future episodes. And make sure you follow us on Instagram at Heroes and Mutants Podcast, and join our sweepstakes, our raffle that we're going to be doing very soon, because we're going to extend that by another week. So make sure you guys join, make sure you guys follow, and we will see you next time. Thank you guys.
Thank you.